What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today I'm going to get you started with a very basic, very simple version of a real-time chat app. Now, we're going to primarily be focusing on the actual functionality of the chat app and not too much on the UI side, so just keep that in mind. But I'm going to actually show you how to get up and running so that you can save data to DynamoDB, and we're going to be actually using AppSync under the hood so that we can get some real-time updates, and all this is going to be facilitated by using AWS Amplify API. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. Alright, so the very first thing that we're going to do is open up our terminal and go to the root directory of our app. So as you can see, I'm right here at the root directory of our app. I already created it, and what we want to do is actually do Amplify init so we can get an Amplify project locally and in the cloud. So let's run that. I'm just going to go ahead and enter in all the default values here, and because most of these don't actually matter, I will select Vim as my editor so that when I edit my GraphQL schema, I can open it up with Vim, but other than that, default values. Alright, so once we have our Amplify project initialized locally and in the cloud, now we can go ahead and run Amplify Add API. And once again, we're just going to select all the default values. I will be using GraphQL for this one, so just make sure that one is selected, and default values for everything else. Now, when it gets to the do you want to edit schema now question, I'm actually going to hit yes because I want to update that to be a message object as opposed to a to-do. So let's change that now. Alright, so as you can see, my schema is all updated. We're going to be working with an object called message, and we have an ID. The sender name, as you can see, we're going to keep it extremely simple. The data structures are going to be extremely simple. We're just going to simply save a name as a string for our users. We're not going to actually have like sign in and stuff like that. Then we have the body of the message, and then we also have a creation date. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's go ahead and run Amplify push. So it's going to give us a status update. Do we want to continue? You bet your sweet butt we do. And do we want to create the newly GraphQL APIs? Yep. And we're going to save it there. And we want to add all the operations. Maximum level nested is 2. API.swift is fine. And now we wait for everything to go up to the cloud. All right, looks like we got that success message. So now let's go ahead and make sure that we run Amplify CodeGen models so that we can create our models. And it looks like we're ready to go. So now we have to actually start using our libraries, right? And we need to use those in our iOS project. And how do we get them into our project? Using CocoaPods. So let's go ahead and run pod init. And then of course we need to open up our pod file. So as usual when using Amplify, you need to specify the platform. I'm going to specify that we're going to be using iOS 14. So I'll just go ahead and update that. And then we need to make sure that we add in the correct pods, which are going to be Amplify and then the Amplify API plugin. All right, looks good to me. Let's go ahead and save this file and run pod install repo update. Looking good, all done with all the setup and configuration. Let's go ahead and open up our XC workspace. All right, cool. So we have our XC workspace opened up. Let's make sure that we add in our generated models and our configuration files. So I'm gonna go ahead and add those in right now. Go to the root of my project, and I should see the Amplify configuration and the AWS configuration file. I'm gonna add those in, and then I'm gonna add some more files in. I'm actually going to add a folder in, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to Amplify, we're going to go to generated and select models, and I'm going to make sure that it has added folders, is going to create groups. I'm going to go ahead and hit add. So then that throws in our generated models, which is going to contain our message object that we specified. So now what we can do is we can head right on over to our app object, and what we need to do is we need to make sure that we import Amplify and Amplify plugins. Then we have to make a configure Amplify function, and then add the plugin to our Amplify object, all wrapped in a do catch block. All right, so as you can see, we just need to make sure that we have an instance of our Amplify models. We need to add the AWS API plugin, but in order to create that, we need to pass in some model registration, which is what our Amplify models object does, and then we can actually try to configure Amplify. Everything goes well, we get a little message that says configured Amplify. Not so well, we get a nasty little error right there. So then all we have to do is make sure that we call this configure amplify method in our initializer, and we're good. So let's go ahead and run it. Let's see if the app actually works as expected before we keep going. All right, and there it is, configured amplify. It looks like we know what we're doing, doesn't it? All right, so let's go back over to either your content view or your message view. This is just a blank view, right? And let's go ahead and think about what we need to add here. So we need to have a list of our messages, and then we also need to have a place where we can actually have a text field put and a send button, right? So it sounds like we're going to be working with a VStack to hold our list, and then and then we're going to have a HStack to hold like the text field and the button. Oh, and we're also going to be using a lazy VStack instead of a list, just because that's probably the right way to do it if you were to implement the UI this way. So let's go ahead and add in some of those UI elements right now. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on here. So we have this VStack, right? And that's going to once again hold our scroll view, which is going to hold all of our messages. And then we have this HStack, which is going to hold our text field and our button. So we're going to be able to enter in text down here, and then we're going to be able to press send, right? And then we're going to be able to see all of our messages here. Nothing too crazy right now. Let's go ahead and create like a messages view as well, just so that we can have that in there and we can display that. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in a new file, and it'll be a SwiftUI file, and I'll just call it messages or message view or message row. Let's call it message row. All right, so our message row is going to have a couple of different things just so that this could look a little bit like a chat application, and I want it to look more similar to Slack than I do to like something like iMessages. So I'm going to have all the images or the icons on the left side, and then all the text is always going to be on the left side. We're not going to have bubbles and all that ugly weirdness. I think Slack is very clean actually. So let's go ahead and do it that way. All right, so as you can see here, we have everything pretty much set up. We have a little image right here. Right now it's just simply showing the question mark icon. I'm going to change this up, and I'm going to make it so that we can actually show the first letter of the user's name. So it's going to be essentially the first initial, and that will just you know, bring up the correct system image for that user's name. And then, so it'll be like K or something, just so that you know. And then we have this VStack right here, which is going to hold both of these labels or these text views. So the first one's just going to be the username, and you can see that's bold, and it has a headline, and then we have the body message. Now, the only thing that I don't like that's going on right now is that we have all the views centered. So let's go ahead and fix the alignment to the left. All right, so I think that looks a whole lot better. As you can see, we have the icon right there, we have the username and the message, and then we have like a little divider to make it look, you know, snazzy. So then what we want to do is we want to make sure that this message row is initialized with two different things, because I want two different things to happen. First, it needs to be initialized with a message so that we can properly fill out this data. We can pass in the user's, the sender name, and we can pass in the body of that message. We also want to be able to create an icon based off of the user's initial, so we're going to have some logic for that. And then we also want to make sure that we update the color of that icon just so that we can distinguish between two users. And if it's the current user's username, then we're going to have it blue, just like in iMessage. But if it's the some other person, if it's somebody that we're talking to, then they're going to have a green icon. So let's go ahead and add in some of that logic real quick, and just so that we can have better, looking UI. It's going to still be kind of ugly, but it's going to be better looking at least. All right, so I did a lot here, but we're gonna still just run through it because we're not here for UI, we're here for functionality. So as you can see, we have a message row, which we're going to need to initialize like this. So we have a message row, we need to pass in a message. We have a dummy message right here. The sender's name is Kilo Loco, body is hello world, creation date right this second. So now we also need to pass in, is this the current user? I'm just gonna say true. If I were to say false, what we're gonna actually see happen is the icon is going to change to green. So just a little bit of functionality right there, and let me show you where we're doing that. So inside of this message row, we have two computed properties. The first one is going to be the icon name. So if you check out SF symbols, you can actually see that there are icons for letters as long as you have it lowercase. So if we can get the first letter of the sender's name, then we're going to just simply return that as the icon name. If not, we're going to return a question mark. And right here in our H stack, you can see that we're creating this image once again with this icon name. So it will be that lowercase letter K, circle fill. If we can't find it, then we're going to have a question mark circle fill, just like it was before. Then we also have this other computed property, which is the icon color. And if the person that's sending the message, the owner of the message, is equal to the current user, then we're going to show a blue bubble right here for their icon color. If it's not the current user, just going to show a green one. And you can see that I plopped that in here for the foreground color. So that's all that's going on here. We have a nice little message row. Let's go back over to our messages view, and let's go ahead and plop in a for each of the messages, and then also create a message row. Oh, but before we do that, I just noticed that we actually didn't implement our source of truth. So the source of truth is going to kind of be like, whether you want to call it a view model, a repository, or whatever. I'm going to call it a source of truth because this is where we're going to get all of our data from, and this is where we're going to actually implement the Amplify methods. So let's go ahead and create a new file that's called source of truth, or call it whatever you want, I don't really care. And we're going to actually import Amplify at the top as well. Alright, so we have our source of truth, and it needs to be an observable object because we're actually going to be observing this published property, which is messages, and that's just going to be an array of our messages. So we're going to come back over here to start implementing that functionality that we're so curious about, but let's go back over to our messages view and implement an instance of our source of truth as an observed object, and then we can create our for each loop, which will then allow us to create our message row. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our for each loop, and I'm going to address that error right now, but what we're doing is we're passing in a message because it's going to be iterating through this array of messages. Now, what we also want to do is we want to make sure that we pass in that message into a brand new instance of our message row. So we do that, and then as of right now, I'm just going to say is current user. I'm going to set it to true always. So all the messages are just simply going to be from us. So before we get to the is current user thing, let's go ahead and fix our for each loop. And in order for that to work, we need to make sure that we have our message object conform to identifiable. So let's go ahead and create a new extension or a new file to add that extension in there. And it's just going to be a Swift file. Alright, and as you can see, I just simply added extension, message is identifiable, so perfect. Now, let's go ahead, go back over to our messages view, And we should no longer see an error right here because our messages now conform to identifiable. So let's make sure that we save this change over here on our message extension. And if we go back over to our message view, let it update a little bit, and there we go. So everything's working. Now, like I said, we're not going to be having any sign in or anything like that. So we're going to just hard code the current user's value. So let's go ahead and add that in as well. So the current username, we'll just simply update it and hard code that value so that we can show that this is one user, and then we can have a message coming from a different user. So we have this property right here just called current user, and I'm going to give it a string called Kilo Loco, and if the message sender name is equal to the current user right here, then that's what we're going to be passing into our message row. So if it's true, blue bubble; if it's false, green bubble. Alright, and the very last thing that we need to do in order to get everything working before we start implementing functionality is we simply need to make sure that we're able to update the message. So whenever I type something into my enter message, I need to make sure that I have a function that can handle what's going to happen and pass that into the button right here. So the only thing that we're going to implement right now is that whenever we press send, it needs to clear the text. Alright, so we added the action as did tap send, and then we're going to simply print out what's in the text and then remove everything. So let's go ahead and run it, make sure that the app is working as we expect it to at the moment. Alright, so looking good. We tap on it, it reacts to the keyboard, which is a really nice handy little feature in SwiftUI. Let's go ahead and type something. So what better than type something? And let's hit send, and as you can see, it clears the text, and we have type something right here. Perfect. Now we can actually get into the meat of everything. So let's go ahead and get back over to our source of truth, because this is where all the action is going to be happening. So as you can see, we have this published property called messages, which is going to be an array of messages. The very first thing that we need to do is we need to be able to create those messages. So let's go ahead and create a function called send so that we can actually send a new message. Alright, so as you can see, we have our function and it's called send, and we're passing in a message, so we're expecting the message object to be created at the call site, which is going to be in our messages view. Perfectly fine. And what we want to do is we want to keep in mind that Amplify API, especially when we're working with Graphql, is only going to have one of three things that it can do. Either we're going to be doing a query, so we're looking up and reading the value, or we're going to be creating some type of mutation, whether that's going to be creating the object, or we're going to be updating it or deleting it. So what we need to do is we need to create a mutation, and the specific type of mutation we want to do is create. So let's go ahead and start implementing some of that right now. Alright, so as you can see here, we're simply calling amplify.api.mutate. And once again, we're going to be creating something, and in this case, we're going to be creating a message, which is passed into the function itself. And then what's going to happen is we're going to actually get a result. We're going to get our first result. So the first result is just essentially specifying whether it was able to create the mutation or not, like whether the mutation call was successful or not. Not that it actually created that object in the backend yet. So this mutate is going to return a mutation result, and then we're going to switch on the mutation result. So if we successfully are able to do a mutation, then we'll get another result passed into the success. But if we weren't able to mutate, if there was an API error, there was something wrong with API itself, then we'll get that API error here. So let's go ahead and just print out the error and then do the switch on the actual creation result. Alright, so as you can see, now we did our switch on the mutation result, and we have our switch on the creation result, something completely different. And if we were able to successfully create, then we will get back the same message that we just created. So this might be useful to you if you need the actual ID or something like that, then you can update, but we're actually not going to be using that here. So we can get rid of the returned object right there, and we can just say success. If we do get an error with our GraphQL creation, then we're going to get this error right here in this failure block, and we'll once again just print that bad boy out. All right, perfect. And I think I added in a weak self right here, which was not necessary, just force of habit, I guess. But as you can see here, just simply printing out for both of those. Now let's go ahead and try to implement this function at the call site, which is going to be in our messages view. So when we do tap send, we want to actually call that function from our source of truth instance right here. So let's go ahead and try that out. And there we have it. We have our message, which we're creating right here with the current user, which is hard-coded up at the top. We have the body being passed for, or the text being passed for the body, and then the creation date is simply right this second. So then we do SOT, source of truth, dot send, and we send that message. So let's go ahead and run it. Let's see if we can get a success message in our logs. All right, perfect. And now we can just say my first message like that, if I know how to spell message, and we can hit send, and we can see that we successfully created the message. Perfect. Oh yeah. So now what we want to do is we want to actually show that message on the screen, because as you can see right here, man, look, it's blank. Nothing happened. We can't see the data. We can see it on our logs, but we can't see it on our screen. So let's head back over to that source of truth. And now what we need to do is we need to create a get messages function, which is going to obviously get our messages. So let's do that now. So remember what I said. When we're trying to create, update, or delete, that's a mutation. But if we're simply just trying to read, then that's going to be a query when you're referring to GraphQL. So let's go ahead and run Amplify API Query. So as you can see, we have the Amplify API Query, and the request that we're going to do is going to simply be a list. We want to list out all the objects that we can that are in our messages right here. And I am going to be passing weak self this time because we actually need to update this messages array right here, which is tied to our UI in our messages view. So we're going to be updating the UI. Now once again, you get a result, and this result will once again give you another result. So another way that we can handle unwrapping these results is using the .get function on the result. And that's going to get our nested value, which we can do .get again, and then we can essentially be able to write less lines of code and get our value as expected. All right, so as you can see, we wrapped everything in a do block inside of our result block, right? Inside of our listener. Now we have access to our result, which was being passed in right here. And whenever we call .get, which is a throwing function, it's going to give us the success value of that Swift result. And since it's nested twice, we're doing .get. So instead of doing two switch statements like we did here, one switch statement right there, and then another one right here, we're able to do .get, which gives us this, and then .get again, which gives us this, which is a really nice way to do it. And then if there is any type of error, whether it's this error or this error, it's all going to pop up in our catch. So really nice. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that once I have these messages, and you can see that it is an array of messages, we're going to return to the main thread because this is an asynchronous task. Make sure you do that, or else there's going to be purple all over your screen. And then we're going to update the messages, our self.messages, to the queried messages. So we're going to update this value right here, which is acting as a publisher, which we're observing back over here in our messages view. So looking really nice. And now all we need to do is make sure that we call get messages. So I'm going to just add that in an initializer. All right, so whenever our view is initialized, it's going to call our source of truth .get messages. It's going to run through, It's going to make this query. It's going to list out all the messages, and we should be able to update all of our messages and see them on the screen now. So let's run it. Let's see if it works. Bam, and there it is. As you can see, my first message is already printed to the screen. Awesome. So let's go ahead and try to type in a new message. And when we hit send, what happens? Well, nothing, because once again, over here in our messages view, we're only calling get messages once, right? And we need to essentially be watching for any new messages that are coming in. So this is the part where the real live data actually comes into play, because we're getting the messages, we're getting the ones that already exist, right? But what we want to do is we want to watch for any new messages and then also add those to the screen. So let's head back over to our source of truth, and now we're going to create our third and our final method, which is going to be observe messages. Now, in order for us to observe our messages, we're going to actually need to hang on to the instance of the listener, and we're going to do that with a subscription object, which is provided by Amplify. So let's go ahead and create that subscription object right now. So this will hang on to the instance of our listener. It's a GraphQL subscription operation object, and we need to specify which type we're planning on subscribing to. In this case, we're going to be subscribing to our message. Now, what we can do is we can set the value of subscription to the listener of our Amplify API.subscribe method. Alright, so in our amplify.api.subscribe, we're passing in 3 different parameters. The first one being the request. So we're specifying that we want to create a subscription on message, and we want to observe specifically the onCreate event. So whenever a new message is created, we should get the value listener to fire. So that takes us to the second parameter, which is a value listener, which takes in a closure, and it's going to pass in a subscription event. Now this is going to essentially be whenever an object is actually created, so we get back that object, and we can switch based off of whether there was a difference in the connection status, so maybe something got connected or disconnected, or the data that we actually want to use, which is the message itself. Lastly, we have the completion listener, and this is simply what happens, or this is the function that gets fired whenever the completion either is interrupted or comes to a successful ending. So whenever we're closing out our subscription. So that's what this completion listener is doing for us. So let's go ahead and update the subscription event and the completion event, or the completion listener. I'll simply print out the completion listener because we're not going to be doing anything with it today. But for the value listener, we want to switch on the subscription event itself. Alright, so as you can see here, in my completion listener, just simply printing out the object that is passed in, the completion. So up over here at our value listener, when we get the subscription event, I'm going to switch on it. Now you can't just do .get because this does not return a Swift result, it returns a custom type of result. So we actually do have to switch on it on the switch event, and then we have the connection, which once again I'm just going to print out that connection status. We're not really interested in that today. And then we have the case of data, in which case it will give us a data result. So I can do .get on the data result because it is a Swift result, and I'm just saying let message is equal to try data result.get, and then once again returning to the main queue before I append that new message to our messages array. So that should be all we need to do in order to make sure that everything is observing incoming messages and get live data actually working. So what we can do is head back over to messages view, and we want to make sure that we're observing messages right after we get our messages. And we're just going to call SOT.observe messages. So let's run this, and hopefully everything will work as expected. All right, here we go. So we have our 2 messages from before, and let's go ahead and add in a third. and we hit send, and there it is. It was added to our array. So that's very nice, very cool. Next, what I want to do is I just want to make sure that it is live data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually connect my real device and run it on there too, so that you can see that it's real live data. It's live. All right, it's all running, but I didn't do anything yet because I forgot to change the current user for this device. So I just want to make sure that I update it so that there is a difference in the initial. So I'm going to just call it Loco Master. All right, and let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so pretty cool thing. You can actually see that the icons are green. You may not be able to see that they're focused, but you can see that they're green. And then what I want to do now is I want to say like something special. And okay, so as you can see on the screen, we have our live data. As soon as I hit send, it gets updated. Bam. So now what you can see is that there's that blue one right there, which means that it's from the current user on this device. And then what we can see right here is that we have a green one on this device. So that's really, really cool. The only other thing that I would recommend doing is that we just make sure that everything's sorted by date, because right now by default everything's going to be sorted by the ID. Now it does seem to be showing up in order, but as you can see, it didn't show up in order right there. And let me run it on the simulator. All right, and as you can see, we have stuff kind of out of order. So we had our messages in order, but when we sent it from Loco Master, it got like inserted in the wrong order. So that's why we added in our creation date. So let's head back over to our source of truth. And what we can do is we can simply update this messages that's being returned from the query to be sorted in order by creation date. All right, so now we have this sorted by the creation date of the two objects in question. And let's see if it shows up properly. I may have the arrow the wrong way. I'm not sure, to be honest. All right, and oh no, it still looks like it's not working. So I think that the problem is that we are actually using the wrong type. So if we take a look at our message object, we have a date. And what's happening is we're probably just working against the date itself, but not actually the time. So what we want to actually do is change this to be a timestamp. Now, what I'll do, since we have this problem and I have to work through it, is I'll actually show you how to delete messages just so that we can go through the entire operation of, creating, reading, and deleting. So let's go ahead and create a new function just so that we can delete all of our messages, and then what we'll do is we'll actually create them again. All right, so as you can see, I just created this basic delete function, and it's going to be delete, and then we're going to pass in an instance of the message, and then we just do Amplify.api. This is a mutation. So we're going to delete the individual message, and then all I'm going to do is simply just print out the result. So what I can do over here, just so that we can delete all of our messages, is we can loop through each of those messages that are returned in our query, and then pass them to the delete method. Okay, so as you can see, we're just going to loop through each message, pass it into the delete, and when we run it the first time, I think that we should be able to see that it deleted each of those messages. Some of them might come back, but overall we should have an empty array. So we ran it once, it should have deleted each of those messages, and then if we run it again, we should see that our list is empty. All right, there we go. All of our messages are deleted, so that's good. Let's remove that. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go back over to the terminal, and let's go ahead and update our GraphQL schema. So this is also, I guess, good practice just so that you can see how to update it. So we want to go over to our GraphQL schema, which we can find like this. And we can find that by doing cd. We're going to change directory into Amplify. Then we want to do backend API, the first thing in there, and from here what we want to do is open up our schema. .graphql. So as you can see, this is where our schema is, and right here for the creation date, what we want to do is we want to change this to AWS timestamp. All right, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and save my file, change directory back all the way to the root of my project, and I'm going to run Amplify CodeGen models. And then since we made a change, we need to also update our backend, so we'll do Amplify push. And as you can see, there's been an update, so we're just going to simply hit enter for the default, and then we're going to hit enter again, and it's going to take those changes that we've made, send them up to our backend, and then we should be able to actually use timestamps for the creation date as opposed to just the date, which was causing us to not be able to sort things properly. All right, there we go. So now let's go ahead, make sure that our models are still up to date, and we should see that the creation date is now an integer. So that's even better because now we can actually just work directly with the creation date timestamp. So let's go back over to our messages view, because this is where we're actually creating the creation date, or we're setting the creation date. And let's run it. Let's make sure that everything is like going to update based off of the new models. So now we have this problem right here, and instead of now, what we can do is we can create an integer from our date by doing date like this and time interval since 1970 like that. So that should be able to give us a creation date. So let's go ahead and run this on our simulator again, and let's start adding in messages. Oh, it looks like I have another error, and we go to over here and we'll just say 0. That's fine, since that's just a preview. We don't even care about no preview. All right, let's go ahead and enter a message starting again, and we'll do send. There we go. My second. Like so, looking good. Let's go ahead, run it. Let's make sure that everything is sorted the way that it should be. All right, so starting again and then my second, perfect. So everything looks like it is coming in order. Now what I wanna do is I wanna make sure that I run it on my actual device, and then we have to go back over to messages view, make sure that we're signing in as a different user. I'm gonna be Kilo Loco again. We're gonna run it. All right, so now I could go ahead and enter in looking fresh. And I enter it, and bam, it's looking good, it's looking good. Let's try another one. And I press send, and that's pretty quick. All right, so it looks like everything is working. Next thing I wanna do is I also wanna make sure I am able to type here. And let's see the live update. I'm gonna press send in 3, 2, 1, and that's pretty quick. All right, let's run it again, make sure that everything stays in order, and if it does, then we did our job. Well, everything did stay in order, but I wanted it to be on the simulator, so let me run that. All right, and here we go, and the moment of truth is that it did work. Okay, cool. So I actually do know what I'm doing. I just chose the wrong type. Sorry about that, but a little bit of debugging never hurt nobody. Well, it causes a lot of hours of pain and banging your head into a keyboard, but never hurt nobody. Anyways, that's pretty much it. That's how you do live data by using the API category from AWS Amplify. As you can see, we were able to implement like a little basic chat type app right here. The UI isn't sexy whatsoever, and you know, there's all kinds of other things that would need to be implemented into a chat app, but at least you were able to see how to get real-time data working right here. So that's going to be it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you like the fact that I messed up, and you know, hopefully next time I won't have a mess up, but you know, I'm human too. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for your time. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe. Now go out there and keep coding passionately.